All right, good evening and welcome to a special broadcast of the Ripon Rabbit Hole. It's going to be very interesting tonight. We encourage you to stay tuned as we get everything ready for your viewing pleasure.
This school, unlike the other one-room schoolhouses, is a little special. People were concerned about slavery being spread into the new territories west of the Mississippi. And there was a person living in Ripon at that time called Alvin Beauvais. And Beauvais, who came here from New York, was really opposed to spreading slavery. He got a bunch of people together. They met in this building in 1854, and they decided to create an organization which would resist the spread of slavery in our country, and they called themselves Republicans. And that's how the Republican Party got started here.
Political parties are, among other things, mechanisms for generating leadership. The founding of a major political party must therefore be an extraordinary leadership act. This is the story of an extraordinary series of leadership acts that took place right here in Ripon, Wisconsin. Nowadays, Ripon is a bustling community of 7,500 citizens nestled in the heart of Wisconsin's farm and resort territory. But in 1854, when the Republican Party was founded in Ripon's Little White Schoolhouse, the city was still part of the American frontier, and the issue of human slavery was on everybody's minds. The story really begins in 1844.
Ripon is a unique community in several ways, and one of the ways in which it is unique is our founding. We were founded by an unusual group of settlers in 1844. These were people from what was then called Southport, Wisconsin, now Racine, who were strong believers in a version of what was called Fourierite socialist philosophy. This philosophy was popular in several areas of America, particularly in western New York, and many of these settlers were from. They were brought together by a highly charismatic figure named Warren Chase, who came from New Hampshire. Chase had unusual opinions and apparently extraordinary ability in motivating people. He brought these people together with the idea of creating a utopian community somewhere up north. This was agreed upon. They raised money for the community by selling shares, which made it a kind of a capitalist socialist community. They then came up to Ripon, to just a bit west of the current town, in the area we still call Ceresco, and founded their town, which they called Ceresco after the goddess of agriculture in Roman mythology, goddess Ceres. They built a school, a grist mill, and a longhouse. The whole idea, of course, was communal living. But the inhabitants very quickly got tired of communal dining and began eating in their rooms, and finally, in part due to its own success and the fact that the price of the land they owned had gone up a great deal, they finally agreed to dissolve and sell the land, which they did at quite a profit.
The Ceresco community in Ripon lasted 4 years. That may seem like a very short period of time, but it was the longest lasting Foyeristic community in the United States. It probably did not last for a variety of reasons. The primary one was that they never quite got enough settlers to make it go. Another reason was that they got an overabundance of single men joining the community as opposed to families, and that caused quite a bit of friction because they were supposed to be having meals communally, domestic duties were supposed to be done communally, and the women of Ceresco were upset that they were essentially doing laundry and food preparation and so on for people other than their husbands. So when it broke up in 1848, it broke up very amicably. The land was distributed among the people that were still at Ceresco, and many of those people remained in the area and became upright citizens of the Ripon community, even though Ceresco was disbanded.
The second wave of white settlers was initiated by a land developer named Captain David Mapes, who headed west after his steamboat and worldly fortune sank in New York's East River. Mapes struck a deal with former acting governor of the Michigan Territory, John Scott Horner, who owned much of the land in the area. The two founded the city of Ripon adjacent to the Ceresco commune, and Mapes set out to recruit settlers.
Well, part of the deal that Horner made with Mapes was that Mapes would build a mill on Silver Creek, and then he would build a hotel. And the site chosen for the hotel is about where the city building is today at the end of the square. And the reason for the mill, of course, is fairly obvious. The farmers needed a place to have their grain turned into flour. And the reason for the hotel is that it would be the headquarters for the promotion of the village. And as people came through this area, they would stop at the hotel either for lodging or for food, and this would give Mapes a chance to talk to them. And if he liked their looks, why, he'd encourage them to stay. And he might even offer them a lot downtown if they wanted to start a bank. And in fact, this is the sort of thing that he did. And if he didn't like their looks, why, he'd tell them about something that was happening further west and encourage them to go on. And it seems to have worked. In other words, he got people like Alvin Beauvais, who was later to be the first town lawyer, to stay here.
In 1851, Mapes and several others founded Ripon College as a means of attracting desirable citizens.
So Ripon was founded by a kind of combination of idealists who were searching for a great utopian goal and highly pragmatists. And I think in some respects that combination of pragmatic idealism explains in part what happened in 1854 and what is part of the character of the town ever since.
Meanwhile, a national crisis was brewing over the issue of human slavery. It was a time of rapid westward expansion, and forces on both sides of the struggle hoped to enhance their strength in the new territories. The major political parties of that time tried to avoid all divisive sectional issues in order to appeal to a majority of voters. They were especially careful to avoid the issue of slavery, the most emotional and divisive of all.
Yeah, the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854 was a major event on America's way to the Civil War. It came about for the following reasons. There were lots of people in the North that had begun to oppose slavery, especially in the 1830s and 40s. But their opposition to slavery was always halted by the fact that they didn't believe that they had the right to interfere with slavery in the South. That is, they thought slavery was wrong for a variety of reasons, moral reasons, economic reasons, but they didn't believe that there was any way that slavery could be ended because, after all, the Constitution was protecting. What they did believe, however, was that the federal government had the right to prevent slavery from spreading. In other words, the federal government controlled slavery in the territories, even though it didn't in the states. So increasingly, in the 1840s, people began to believe that the way to oppose slavery would be to oppose its spread. And that was an issue in the Compromise of 1850 when California came in as a state. But it became a really big issue in 1854 when they were about to open up the territory known as the Kansas-Nebraska Territory, which includes not only the present-day states of Kansas and Nebraska, but also the Dakotas and Montana. So it was a lot of what was lying west of the Mississippi River. A senator from Illinois named Stephen Douglas, a Democrat, proposed a solution to this problem of whether there would be slavery to the west of the river or not, and that solution was what was called popular sovereignty. That meant that the people who actually settled in Kansas or Nebraska would decide for themselves whether that would be a slave state or a free state. And that's what he proposed in the Kansas-Nebraska bill, that instead of the federal government dictating whether a new territory would be slave state or free state, the people there would decide.
You're listening to the birthplace of the Republican Party Foundation. We're in Ripon, Wisconsin. It is taking place tonight.
So let's let the people who live there decide. Because it was roundly rejected by lots of people in both the North and the South. They rejected it for the same reasons at some level. The North rejected it because they didn't want people deciding whether it would be slave or not. They thought slavery was wrong and shouldn't spread. Southerners believed the same thing from the other way around. They didn't want people out there deciding that there would be no slavery because they wanted to be able to take their slaves into any territory at all. So what began as an attempt to bring a solution.
All right, so we are live on the internet and the World Wide Web right now, as we are going to break away from this particular video, and we are going to go live to Ripon, Wisconsin, where the ignition of the flame will begin. There isn't any doubt that the meeting in the Little White Schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin, March 20th, 1854, played a major role in the political landscape of today. This fact was preserved in a major way exactly 100 years later to the day in 1954. Days before the centennial of the Republican birth, on March 7th in Washington, D.C., Vice President Richard Nixon, was also the chairman of the Republican Centennial Committee, made a remarkable announcement concerning Ripon. Nixon had announced plans for the rekindling of the freedom flame, and that citizens of Ripon have pledged to keep the flame burning. Nixon said the flame will be lighted at the same small schoolhouse where Whigs, Free Soilers, and Democrats gathered in 1854 and pinned upon themselves the label of Republicans. He went on to say that the affair held in Ripon on March 20th, 1954 will be attended by many Republican national leaders, Hollywood stars, and others. Ripon will be the site of the Freedom Flame, which will be kindled like the flame burning before the tomb of the unknown soldier. It will continue to burn as long as freedom lives in America, said Nixon.
We can't see anything.
By the next morning, the vice president's announcement was found in newspapers all across the nation, and throughout the coming days, the sensation of this event would grow. By the following week, it was revealed that President Ike Eisenhower himself would officially open the centennial celebration of the Republican Party in Ripon, Wisconsin, by pressing a telegraph switch in the nation's capital to light the freedom flame, and that at 8 o'clock on March 20th, the President of the United States will press the telegrapher's key and spark an electrical impulse that will travel by wire of Western Union to the freedom flame and cause Ripon's memorial candle to light. It was said the lighting will then set in motion a Freedom Torchlight Brigade of some 1,000 torchbearers who will march through the streets of Ripon lighting candles in every home and business establishment, setting forth a presidential proclamation that this Freedom Brigade is to be repeated every year thereafter on March 20th. There was a time in the 80s when magician David Copperfield vanished the Statue of Liberty. Many people still credit this feat as the greatest illusion ever, and I remember how captivated I was as a small boy watching the illusion on live TV. Today, in 2018, I find the reason why David vanished the Statue of Liberty and the symbolism he brought more important than the trick itself.
I want to tell you why I did this. My mother was the first one to tell me about the Statue of Liberty. She saw it first from the deck of a ship that brought her to America. She was an immigrant. She impressed upon me how precious our liberty is and how easily it can be lost. And then one day, it occurred to me that I could show with magic how we take our freedom for granted. Sometimes we don't realize how important something is until it's gone. So I asked our government for permission to let me make the Statue of Liberty disappear, just for a few minutes. I thought if we faced emptiness, where for as long as we can remember that great lady has lifted up her lamp, why then we might imagine what the world would be like without liberty, and we'd realize how precious our freedom really is. And then I would make the Statue of Liberty reappear by remembering the word that made it appear in the first place. The word is freedom. Freedom is the true magic. It's beyond the power of any magician. But wherever one human being guarantees another the same rights he or she enjoys, we find freedom.
All right, so you need, I'm not going to be in it, so it'll be Billy, and why don't, let's see, you and Aubrey hold it.
How long can we stay free?
No, don't fight
For
it.
just as long as we keep thinking and speaking and acting as free human beings.
Measure twice the
Our ancestors couldn't. We
And it
can,
never
and our children will.
On the night of March 20th, 1954, President Eisenhower was attending the White House Press Photographers Dinner in his honor. He left and went to a nearby room. He pushed down on a special golden telegraph key embossed with a gold flag. He held down the key for a few moments and then looked at D.E. Long, the White House communications officer. "That ought to do it," the president said.
Is it all right to have it?
Long nodded, and Mr. Eisenhower started back to the banquet. But he had to stop, making certain that the flame had lit. The president was told that he had indeed ignited the gas torch in front of the little white schoolhouse, and Ike then urged his fellow Republicans to face the future, as he put, with faith, hope, and courage to fulfill their responsibilities. The celebration in Ripon had indeed begun. Amazement as the flame flashed into the night when the president pressed the key in Washington, as excitement had broke out from all those who were witness to the ignition. Ripon Mayor Robert Bourne told the cheering crowd of several thousand that, "I solemnly pledge in behalf of the people of Ripon,
But do you want it
their
lit or
children,
not lit?
and their children's children, to keep this torch aflame as long as freedom
Do you want it
exists,
lit or not
and God willing, may it forever."
Okay, you want some
Then 600 torches made from rags soaked in oil, tacked onto long sticks, were lit from the flame of the Freedom Flame and spread through the city of then 5,600 people in a giant procession. Republican spokesperson and chairman of the Republican National Committee, Leonard Hall, from the president down, had classified the torch and its lighting to be kept aglow as a symbol of America's freedom and liberty, and said, "The light was expected to bring the people all over the world, even behind the Iron Curtain, the hope that they will someday enjoy the freedom that we know in the United States." Leonard was right. The worldwide spotlight shined down on Ripon as the morning papers rang news of the event all around the world.
Yes, and rough as no.
It was compared to other lights in history like the Arc de Triomphe in Paris and the Olympic light from the original flame at the
Is there any
first
chance we
Olympic
can look at
Games.
it, Aaron?
However, by the time President Eisenhower gave his second inaugural address, referencing the Freedom Flame in 1957,
May the light of freedom, coming to all darkened lands, flame brightly, until at last the darkness is no more.
and not long after the spotlight of March 54 had faded, like a Copperfield illusion, the significance of Ripon's flame had vanished. We ask why. Where did it go? It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. The chilling symbolism and disappearance of this light is the slap in the face to the honor in which it was created. We are a new audience now, one that is cheering to rekindle that flame once again. On March 20th, 2018, at 8 p.m. Central, the Ripon Rabbit Hole will, in honor of the duty in our mission for the spirit of Ripon, will electronically reignite that spark just as it was so many moons ago. We vow to hold and keep lit virtually until the presidentially proclaimed tradition and physical freedom flame returns once again to its intended keepers, the citizens of Ripon, Wisconsin. The flame has been lit electronically at the Ripon Rabbit Hole. We're joined now live where the flame continues to burn in Ripon, Wisconsin, where the scene is live. Ripon, how are you?
We're just terrific. It's a little cold here, below zero, with the wind.
Let us see the flame.
Can you see the flame?
Move it a little bit more to the center.
Move it more to the center.
In front of you, Dad. There you go.
Like that?
There you go. How many people are there tonight?
We have 4 people. We have 2 people of the ROTC, Justin and
Well, we thank you for taking part in this celebration, and we'll see you next year.
Okay. God bless America.